25. So we're going to talk about two things, two systems, the endocrine system and the immune system. So the endocrine system includes a lot of the different organs that secrete, and cells and tissue that secrete hormones. Good example of that is insulin. Another is adrenaline. There's all different kinds of hormones. There's growth factors. Oh God, there's so many different kinds. A lot of the hormones are signaling proteins that latch on to receptors on the outside of certain cells and then signal them to do something else. So, for example, the insulin is a hormone that's secreted by beta cells in the pancreas. And they're central to cellular respiration. Remember now, cellular respiration involves breaking down glucose in the presence with oxygen, the whole Krebs cycle, and then getting ATP out of that. Okay, so all cells need to do that to one degree or another, and most of that reaction happens in mitochondria. Okay, so inside cells are mitochondria. Glucose, carbohydrates, those are the things that are the basis for the whole Krebs cycle, cellular respiration. And when the outside of a cell, we can take a look here, outside of a cell. Okay, so here's a cell. These are various proteins for signaling, for entry, for things like that. And then insulin, we'll say, is a protein hormone. And what it does is it latches onto this protein here, and then it opens up a channel, another protein that allows glucose into the cell. Okay, and then the glucose first is broken down through electrolysis, and then finally enters the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. Okay. Now, so other hormones include thyroid hormone, the pancreas, as I mentioned, adrenal hormones, and then, of course, sex hormones that vary among individuals between different sexes. So men have a lot more testosterone, but they do have some estrogen-like of hormones, and women have much more estrogen type of hormones, but they do have a little bit of testosterone too. So the endocrine glands are ductless, and they release tissue. The tissue releases these hormones. These are proteins. And they do that just with the whole gene expression, where there's certain genes that are expressed. An mRNA is made for the various hormone proteins, and then those proteins are made. Okay? And they're released in general, a lot of those hormones may be released actually inside the cell, but mostly into the circulatory system. And then they tell other cells what to do. Signal molecules produced so they're communicating with other cell types. Now, there are there's a gland or a part of the brain called the hypothalamus, is the main coordinator of the endocrine system in the brain. So the brain is tied into all this different, very complex system. So let's say we eat something, and our stomach gets full. There's a molecule release called leptin that goes to the brain that says, "Oh, you're getting full," and then also that tells. In terms of insulin, we also get the same sort of thing. It tells the body when to actually produce insulin. Let's say after we have a meal, we have to immediately be able to break that down. Okay? Some organs, such as the pancreas, function as endocrine glands. That means they release from their tissue, the beta cells, they release insulin. And then also exocrine glands. These are glands with ducts. Liver cells do a lot of that as well. They release chemicals like various kinds of bile through liver ducts. Okay? And then endocrine cells are also scattered throughout the lining of the stomach and the intestine as well. So in terms of when there's going to be uptake of various nutrients and things like that. What organ coordinates the endocrine system? The hypothalamus in the brain. How does an endocrine gland differ from an exocrine gland? Hold on a second. Okay. So how does an endocrine gland differ from an exocrine gland? Endocrine glands are ductless. Exocrine glands have ducts. How do male and female endocrine systems differ? Different sex organs contribute to the endocrine system. In males, it's testes, and females, it's ovaries. And then overlying this whole thing are two insulin-like growth factors that actually control a lot of the hormones, including thyroid hormone and sex hormones as well. Okay, so signaling hormones are signaling molecules that travel through the circulatory system to produce a response in target cells, often located at a distance from the body. For example, cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, which is also a neurotransmitter in the brain, are three hormones produced by the adrenal glands. So a pair of adrenal glands that sit atop the kidneys. The release of these hormones causes rapid physiological responses, like a boost in blood glucose levels, increased energy in times of stress. So some hormones, we look at this. We've got circulating hormones. We've got the target A cell. We've got the endocrine cells that are releasing these hormones into the bloodstream. And they target, let's say, target A. And they latch on to the outside. And then some hormones cross the plasma membrane and act on the receptors inside the target cells. So there's two different kinds here. So endocrine cells produce and secrete hormones. Target cells change in response to those hormones. Why is the hormone a signaling molecule? It signals that something has changed in the organism or the environment that requires a cellular response. usually a chemical cellular response. So individual hormone molecules bind to receptors on target cells, and this usually causes a chain of events, which then activate thousands of protein molecules and many genes in the target cell. And what this does is it amplifies the signal. So here's a cell, plasma membrane. A hydrophobic class hormone can cross the plasmic membrane. Remember, we've got plasma membranes that are composed of hydrophilic and hydrophobic parts of the cellular membrane. Here's a plasma membrane receptor. A hydrophilic hormone must bind to a membrane on the outside, and this causes an effect. Okay, and then so this is in the membrane transport. Hold on a second. And then these hormones on the inside can then control gene expression. So here we are, gene expression, and then change in metabolism as other proteins are made. So we start with these. The hydrophobic hormone, by the way, binds to a cellular receptor inside the cell, and that's gene 1, and then the hydrophilic on gene 2, let's say, and we've got these different mRNAs, protein 1 and protein 2, and then perhaps these proteins then do different things. So, two ways that a hormone outside a cell can exert its effects on a cell: either latch onto a receptor on the outside of the cell or on the inside of the cell. And then those hormones oftentimes are, they affect their signal for gene expression. In other words, it's time to ramp up and make a certain protein. So also some hormones have larger effects, and some hormones kind of get a lot of other hormones working, or causing other hormones to be made. So the binding, like cortisol, to a specific cell activates many proteins within those cells. So for example, if we're looking at insulin and how that mediates glucose transport into the cells. So what happens is, after you eat, your blood sugar rises, glucose in your blood. This rise in glucose triggers your pancreas to release insulin into the bloodstream. Insulin travels through the blood to your body cells. It tells the cells to open up glucose in. So effective glucose on uptake and metabolism. The insulin, in the first case, binds to the insulin receptor, which in turn starts many protein activation cascades. The first of which include translocation of glucose transport into the plasma membrane and the influx of glucose. So here's this glucose that's now coming in. Okay, some of it is turned into glycogen, which is a form of glucose stored in the liver and the muscles, and then other parts of it go into the cell to start cellular respiration with glycolysis, fatty acids. Okay, so some of the glucose gets transported here to turns into glycogen, and other goes into cellular respiration. Okay, so a tiny in the brain, there's kind of this is the region that kind of coordinates everything. It's a base of the vertebrate brain. It coordinates the endocrine system and integrates it with the nervous system. It contains neurons which interact with the brain, and endocrine cells which produce hormones. Some of the hormones, growth factors and things like that. Adrenal glands respond to stress signals from the brain and release cortisol and adrenaline. So, for example, in terms of adrenal hormones produce a rapid response to stress or fear, things like that. So, stress or fear, let's say a frightening stimulus, a rattlesnake, a monster comes into the room, the kinds of things that we don't think about, we just react. The adrenal gland releases adrenaline and noradrenaline into the bloodstream. The liver cells respond to adrenal hormones by breaking down their stores of glycogen. That's a form of glucose that's been stored, and thereby increasing the amount of available. And then heart muscle cells respond to adrenal hormones by contracting and relaxing faster, increasing the rate of blood flow, which requires more glucose. And then if you're going to run away, you need a lot of glucose too.